Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is the morning blast. It is Thursday, the 21st of August, all day, in fact. You join me and the magnificent Mr. Michael Brown as we give a review of yesterday's trading and news, etc., and a preview of today's trading environment and overnight news, etc., etc. But before we crack on, and so I don't get a spanking from HR and legals, I got the legals out the way, so nothing discussed on the space session constitutes trading or investment advice. If there's any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed Mr. Michael Brown. How are you, my dear friend?
Very good morning, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. I'm not too bad at all, thank you, mate. It is almost the end of the week.
Almost. Only 2 days to go. Well, I suppose half a day, 1.5 days for you because you stop bright and early at probably about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that is very true, but
And you're normally in the pub by about midday, so they say.
well, sources, but not tomorrow, unless the Jam Pot wants to put Jay Powell at Jackson Hole on a big screen somewhere, which I don't
Well,
think they're going to do for me.
you say that. I bet I could find a couple of boozers that would.
I'm sure you could. Your encyclopedic knowledge of London pubs comes in handy every now and again.
Well, I don't like to boast, but yes. Right, moving on. Again, stop talking about my high-functioning alcoholism.
As I said this to you last week, mate. Less of the high functioning.
Whoa. Speaking of high-functioning, hello, Angie Setzer, over from the Midwest. What's she
Bloody
doing
hell,
up
it's
at this
early
time
over
of the...
there.
Yeah, I know, exactly that. Anyway, right, what's been crack-a-lacking?
Oh God, please never say that again. Well, I think in terms of markets, it's very much a case of more of the same in terms of what we were
Oh,
brought
and that's the end
yesterday.
of the show.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, I need to have a rant about a few things, so
Oh,
we
good.
should carry on.
Get comfy.
Yeah, in terms of markets, outside of the equity complex, markets not doing especially much at all. The only mover outside of equities was the Kiwi dollar, down about 1% yesterday after that surprisingly dovish 25 basis point cut from the RBNZ, where we had two dovish dissenters in favour of 50 basis points and
Yeah.
guidance nodding towards further cuts going forwards. But in the equity complex, we did see some further downside, led by the tech sector again. It's very much a market where if you're a tech stock, you're struggling. If you're not, then things are all going okay. But one of the things that we did see different yesterday compared to the day prior was dip buyers starting to emerge. The S&P and Nasdaq were down about 1 and 1.5% respectively on an intraday basis. We then closed down by 0.2 and 0.6 respectively. So pairing probably about 2/3 of the declines that we saw intraday, and futures have been pretty much flat overnight. So perhaps that little 2-day slump or swoon in the big tech space is coming to an end, as we spoke about yesterday. This sort of thing is healthy, frankly. Markets are never
Exactly.
going to go up in a straight line and to the right forever. Taking a bit of froth off the top is no bad thing.
Exactly that. Picture blowing that extra bit of head off the top of your ice cold pint. There's nothing beats it, and it makes the pint taste far better. And also, what I will say is, there's been tons of people out there calling for a dip to buy in God knows how long, and they get the dip, and then
Well,
they
go
shit
and fucking
themselves.
buy it.
Exactly. Not
Not
investment advice,
advice.
but
Not advice.
not
Compliance.
advice. But go fucking buy the dip you've been calling for, you mug.
But you are absolutely right. I mean, we get
Oh,
this every
stop it.
time where, oh, the next dip I'll buy into, the next dip I'll buy into, the next dip I'll buy into. Well, Nvidia's down, like 6% or whatever. I haven't got a screen in front of me, of course. Oh no, but it's going to go another 6. Well, it probably isn't. And even if it does, then it's going to rally 20% by year end. So who cares? Anyway,
Not investment advice. Not investment
yeah,
advice.
enough of that. Right, moving on from that, because it was a day of plentiful fundamental catalysts, most of which centered around the Federal Reserve. Firstly, once more, the Trump administration appear to be attacking the independence of the Fed. Yours and my best friend, Ryan, Bill Pulte, the Director of
Oh, love
Federal
him.
Housing in the United States, who, I've got to be honest, if I were something to do with federal housing in the US, I'd be a bit annoyed because the director of your agency seems to spend all day on Twitter just shit posting. It's like, do you not actually have a proper job to do? The other thing I found out about this bloke is he actually got disowned by his own family's charitable foundation. I mean, how much of a wrong-un do you have to be?
Whoa, what happened? Was he spending it on blowing hookers?
I don't know. I didn't do any digging into it after that because I got
So you heard
distracted.
it here
But
first. You heard it here first, everyone. Michael did not deny those allegations.
well, it's not me that's done that. Let me just stress that. It's this geezer. Anyway, setting that aside, what he's done now is started to throw around accusations that Fed Governor Lisa Cook has potentially
Oh
committed
yeah.
mortgage fraud. Now, I'm not an expert on the US mortgage market, but frankly, this seems very, very politically motivated when you consider that Lisa Cook was a Biden nominee to the
Yeah.
Fed board. And obviously the Trump administration have spent the last 6 months or so trying to exert as much influence as they can over policymakers. What this appears to relate to is the fact that Lisa Cook took out a mortgage on one home, said that that was going to be her primary residency, and then is alleged to have taken out another mortgage on another home in a different part of the US and claimed that that is going to be her primary residence as well. Now, in Pulte's eyes, this is, worse than mass murder and she should be hung up on the nearest lamppost. Lisa Cook, I stress, came out with a statement overnight saying, she will respond in due course. She is not going to be resigning because of what someone's put on Twitter, and
Good.
she believes that she has committed absolutely no crime whatsoever. The Wall Street Journal were reporting that Trump has apparently told some of his aides that he's considering firing Lisa Cook. This would be interesting to say the least, particularly because it could then become a precedent case for other governors and maybe even the chair if we were to go all the way down that route. But I think, again, it feels like there's a lot of noise around this. I certainly don't think it's
Yeah.
actually going to come to anything. But it, again, is going to raise questions over the Fed's independence, is going to raise questions over credibility, and also, frankly, just accelerate those capital outflows that we're already seeing out of the dollar and out of US assets, and it's going to boost hard assets such as gold. And really, this is just the latest episode in the soap opera that is Trump trying to take over the Fed. On which note, I think Trump might have finally found the yes man that he wants to take over at the Federal Reserve. We heard from Jefferies chief market strategist David Zervos on CNBC yesterday. The interview started off relatively normal, to be honest, with Zervos saying that he would try and coalesce the FOMC around the idea that policy is actually quite restrictive at the moment, and really with Zervos reiterating what has actually been his stance for a number of years now, which is that basically a neutral policy setting is what he has framed as 2 and 20. What does he mean by that? 2% Fed funds rate, 20% of GDP on the balance sheet. That is where he views neutral to be, which frankly is fine. Everyone can have differing views of where the neutral rate is going to be. It then took a bit of a turn. Zervos then was asked about Fed independence, and he said, well, the reality is the Fed isn't independent. Big tick in the box in terms of what Trump wants to see. He was asked about Chair Powell and said that Powell is clearly operating politically from the left. Another big tick in the box in terms of what Trump wants to see, which is also wrong, by the way, given that Powell has been a registered Republican for basically his entire life and was appointed by Trump. Zervos then went on and went max sycophancy and said, and I quote, Trump's views on rates have in many ways been correct. I mean,
Yeah.
this is
Sure.
just bordering on ridiculous. But I will say, if Zervos were to get the Fed chair job, absolutely nobody is anywhere near bullish enough. This is a bloke who on CNBC yesterday said, and I quote, I am more than excited to use tools such as QE if they are necessary. This is also a man who at the start of last year said, QE is a great drug. It's a great elixir when we're able to do it. And it's a man that put I love QE on baseball hats that were given out to Jeffrey's clients a few years ago. If he were to become Fed chair, I mean, SPOOs are trading to like 7,000 in an instant, I would expect. So I think Zervos is probably one of the front runners now after that interview yesterday. Sticking with the Fed, and this is the last thing I'll mention, we did, of course, get some actual information from the FOMC yesterday, in the form of minutes from the July FOMC meeting, which all read pretty hawkish, to be honest with you. The minutes reiterating that the majority of the FOMC saw inflation risks outweighing employment risks. Several expected that companies would pass tariffs on to their customers. Many noted that the full effect of that could take some time to be felt, and several committee members also flagged the risk of inflation expectations unanchoring. Now, I know a lot of people are going to run round, and people were on Twitter running around and doing this last night and going, well, the minutes are clearly irrelevant because the Fed didn't have the July jobs numbers when they held that meeting. And that is true. But what you need to remember is that the minutes are, stating the obvious here, published 3 weeks after the meeting was held.
Exactly.
They are a signalling mechanism. The Fed put in those minutes what they want the market to hear. If anyone has ever been in a corporate meeting where they've had to take minutes, or if anyone's ever watched Yes Minister where they were doing that sketch around taking meeting minutes,
A
you will
classic.
know that the minutes say what the chair of the meeting wants them to say, not necessarily what was actually
Yeah,
discussed
and
in that meeting.
further to this, basically all the communication's already been coming out from the individual Fed speakers anyway. The minutes are
Exactly.
complete bollocks because no one could. The market has moved on. We've already had data come out since then anyway. Like you said, every Fed governor, well, every person in meetings, minutes wide generally. They've already been out onto the wires and expressly said what they want to be conveyed to the market anyway. The
Mm.
minutes are basically, the minutes were great maybe say 10, 15 years ago when we didn't have, Fed governors, etc., going to Bloomberg, CNBC, Reuters within hours of the Fed decision anyway.
Yeah,
That's when you really needed to read minutes to understand what was going on in the in the inner workings of the Fed. But we know now anyway. We know exactly how people are thinking.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I do think, though, that first line around how inflation risk outweighs risks in terms of the labour market is key. Because, as you say, it's in the minutes. Powell has said it.
Yeah.
Five
Oh
or
yeah.
six FOMC members have said it since that meeting and since the
Oh
July
no.
jobs report was
Exactly.
published.
Exactly.
So the market, of course, is still basically all in on this idea that the Fed are going
Yeah.
to cut 25 basis points at least in a month's time. We obviously hear from Powell at Jackson Hole tomorrow. I think the market should be a lot closer to 50-50 in terms of
Absolutely.
that pricing, particularly
Absolutely.
given we've got another jobs report and another CPI number and the PCE data next week, all still to come on that
It's
front.
exactly that. Again, no investment advice, but I'd be keenly watching these, especially PCE. Obviously, you got to have a drink when you say that, because then you got to say the Fed's preferred measure of inflation, drink. But yeah, I think the market should be waking up to the fact that Powell and other governors can't make it any clearer that they're not going to be pushed by Trump. Well, apart from a couple that are kind of hanging out the back of his arse. And if we are
Get very
focused on
proudly
inflation.
in there.
Well, yeah, very, very. All you can see is a lot of shoes dragging out the back of it.
Oh, no.
Sorry for that mental image, everyone. But yeah, if they've made it very, very clear that inflation is their number one goal here. And inflation isn't a place where you want to be cutting rates. Although,
Yeah.
as I tweeted yesterday, my personal opinion is the rate setting by banks has little to no impact on inflation. It's all, for me, and I've said this over COVID as well, for me, inflation these days, basically pretty much since the global financial crisis, when other forms of monetary policy and fiscal policy came to the fore, is that, inflation is now driven by global supply chains, by trade agreements, by fiscal policies, by non-rate setting monetary policy such as QE, etc. I really don't believe at all that the banks, like say the Fed moving interest rates by a whole percent, even 100 basis points, really moves the dial on household inflation. I just don't see it happening that way anymore. And, come and shout at me if you need. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right on that one. But yeah,
Stop it!
despite that, please just shout at Ryan anyway, because it's quite funny when he gets all
Because
in a
I
bit of
will
a flap.
bite.
Um,
Yeah.
right, moving on from the Fed, a few other
Yes,
things just to
sorry.
mention from yesterday. We did have a 20-year Treasury sale in the States, which stopped through by 0.1 basis points, not too shabby at all. In terms of other headlines, speaking of Jackson Hole, the Bank of Japan, they've confirmed that Governor Ueda is going. So that means the big big four of central banking, Powell, Bailey, Lagarde, and Ueda, will all be in Wyoming later this week. In terms of corporate news, a few headlines. Novo Nordisk, they have slapped on a global hiring freeze. Of course, the stock was 20 or 30% lower the other week after a big cut to their guidance on lower US sales of Wegovy. So the firm is struggling a little bit there. McDonald's, they are cutting the cost of some of their combo meals by up to 15%. So a lot of folk will be loving this one. And
Oh,
last
stop
but
it.
by no means least, Citigroup, they are apparently investing HR complaints against one of their senior employees, a chap called Andy Sieg, who runs their wealth management division. Apparently, he is said to have gone on expletive-filled rants in the office, having sarcastically disparaged other executives and team members behind their back, and also called someone's work pathetic with them and their colleagues present. To which I would say the people involved need to man the fuck up.
Well, do you know what? I was going to say this sounds like a regular Monday morning.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, come to the city of London. That's what, you know,
yeah,
these
okay.
Yanks are clearly too soft.
Yeah, well, funny enough, I was actually talking. So I was doing a podcast interview, which I think is coming out later this week, or maybe even early next week, where they were asking about what it used to be like on trading floors and such. And I just,
Could you actually
yeah.
say any of that for
Oh well,
legal
no, I did
reasons?
say that. I did have to say, look, if you want the real stories, the juicy stories, you have to come and buy me a pint. But don't be mic'd up. But yeah, I was raising the fact that it's a completely different environment these days, and maybe for the right reasons sometimes. But who doesn't like calling someone else a bit of a cunt? But
I mean,
anyway,
if you are, let's call a spade a spade.
oh, okay,
We'll all be happier for it.
Exactly that, my dear friend. You know the score. Even for a young lad like yourself, you understand. But thank you for that. Let me just quickly read out some overnight news headlines. Obviously, our dear friend Zach is on holiday, so no overnight news roundup per se. But I have gone through our feed, the PIQ's own feed, and pulled out some choice headlines for you all. Starting off with India. Indian companies have seen the steepest earnings downgrade in Asia, with analysts slashing forecasts as steep US tariffs heighten risks to growth, even if proposed domestic tax cuts help cushion the impact. They're also being impacted by what is increasingly aggressive rhetoric from Trump against India, especially with India cozying up to Russia and China, especially the Russian buying of oil. And obviously we've just seen direct flights open up again between India and China. So we can see that relationship is warming. Moving over to Ukraine, President Zelensky reported that a Russian attack on an American civilian, put my teeth in, enterprise in interest in negotiating in Ukraine's Zakarpattia, injured 15 people. He added that Moscow had not signalled a genuine interest in negotiating an end to the conflict, and he called for stronger sanctions and to increase tariff pressure. But I'm not sure where he thinks that's going, well, what he thinks that's going to do, because as we know, sanctions and tariffs really haven't impacted Russia at all thus far. But maybe 25th time's the charm. Bank of Japan, they will raise its key interest rates by at least 25 basis points again later this year. That's according to nearly 2/3 of economists surveyed by Reuters. That's up from just over a half of economists surveyed a month ago. The Russian central bank may be able to cut its key interest rates from 18% this year if inflation slows rapidly, but it does not rule out holding it at the level in order to achieve a sustainable slowdown in price growth. That's according to senior.
Trump's head would explode if the Fed had rates at 18%.
Well, this is it, and also, and their inflation is still sky high. So what does that show you? I mean, it proves my point. Anyway, moving to India. India's private sector activity that expanded at the fastest pace on record in August, powered by a historic surge in demand led by dominant service sector, which allowed firms to hike prices at the fastest clip in over 12 years. That's according to a survey showed on Thursday. Germany, their private sector saw slight growth increase in August, driven by manufacturing, which experienced a rise in new orders. The flash German Composite Purchasing Managers Index rose to a 5-month high. However, employment continued to decline and input costs increased, particularly in the service sector. So, yes, maybe you can argue a small bit of good news, but overall it's still poopy news for Germany. French business activity that approached growth in August, which is a great way of saying it's still negative.
Growth.
Yeah. That's a quote.
Rachel Reeves is off to steal that one.
Yeah. Do you know what?
Fucking
I had to
hell.
put it in. I think that's brilliant. Yeah, no, I'm approaching positive on my trading on my trading account. So I'll start again because it's just great to read out. Business activity approached growth in August, outperforming expectations with composite reaching 49.8, so still in contraction. Employment levels increased for the first time since November, despite a pessimistic outlook, while remaining below the
No,
growth
no, no, no,
threshold.
no, 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 no. An outlook that is approaching optimism, right?
Oh, sorry.
Come
Yes,
on.
quite right. They're obviously remaining below the growth threshold. Reduced contractions in manufacturing and services suggest potential economic stabilization. Okay, it's basically clutching at straws here for that one. Um, Oil prices, they extended gains on Thursday and late Wednesday as well, bolstered by signs of strong demand in the US with uncertainty over efforts to end the war in Ukraine, also lending support. What else we got? Bearish bets on China's yuan hit their highest level since mid-May, with analysts turning short for the first time amid mounting concerns over the economy. That's according to a Reuters poll conducted this morning. Uh, Geopolitical news, some what headlines we got here. Taiwan, they plan to boost defense. Start again. Taiwan plans to boost defense spending by a fifth next year, surpassing 3% of gross domestic product as it invests billions more in new equipment to better face down China and convince the United States to take it seriously. Basically, they're throwing more money at Trump to buy US military goods in hoping that Trump's going to look on them more favourably. That's basically the TLDR there. Um, Allied talks of sending European peacekeeping forces to protect Ukraine as part of a possible peace deal with Russia has sparked a backlash in Germany, a country still scarred by its militaristic Nazi past, even if the prospect remains remote. Again, boots on the ground, it seems everyone's against this. And rightly so, in my opinion. New Zealand is facing the toughest national security challenge of recent times, with increasing threats of foreign interference and espionage, particularly
Oh,
from China. That's according to a defense.
thought you were going to say the
Yeah.
sheep have gone rogue or something.
Very good. Hungary, they've offered to host peace talks between Russia and Ukraine twice, and the offer still stands. Hungarian foreign minister said in a podcast broadcast on Facebook on Thursday, but it seems like no one really wants to go to to Hungary. In a statement to reporters, Hungarian President Zelensky stated that he would like a strong reaction from the US if Russian President Putin was not willing to sit down for a bilateral meeting with him. Zelensky added it was unclear what concessions regarding territory Moscow was willing to make, and the Budapest proposal of a location for future talks was challenging. Uganda, they've agreed with the United States to temporarily host nationals from third countries who may not receive asylum in the US but do not want to return home to their countries of origin. The agreement excludes individuals with criminal records and unaccompanied minors. They mean obviously children, not people that go down the pits. With Uganda preferring to receive people, preferring to receive people of African nationalities. This follows an initial agreement with Uganda regarding accepting deportees from the US. So similar lines to what we were seeing with the UK and Rwanda, that was declared the most racist thing in history until Labour decided now to also back that plan. But yeah, let's not get into that. Equity names, just a couple to mention that I've found as I was doing my scrolling through on PIQ. British retailer WH Smith's. Every person in Britain knows who WH Smith's is. Everyone used to go in there as a kid looking to buy or steal magazines. Buy magazines, not steal magazines. They've gone. Oh no. They've lowered its full-year profit outlook on Thursday after a review revealed that earnings had been overstated due to a premature recognition of supplier income in its North American division. So
But
basically,
for those who don't know what that means, it means they're cooking the books.
yes, yeah. They're stating profits and also income, but technically they haven't yet received. Which,
And
as
on an
go on.
unrelated note, good morning, Mr. Rich Bernard.
Yeah, I was about to say my CFO was totally listening. If we could do the same, that would help me out greatly because then maybe I could start taking a salary. Anyway, wealthy Asian families and family offices are ramping up their cryptocurrency investments in the Far East, in Asia. So one for Cam here. This has been driven by bullishness around digital assets, increased mainstream adoption, and favourable regulatory developments in key markets. So again, more bullish news for crypto, and something that keeps coming up with our crypto blast between me and Cam is that barriers to entry and kind of the negative perception around crypto seems to be falling all over the show at the moment. So not really outright, you can't really argue that it's one story that's being hugely bullish, but there seems to be a lot of increasingly bullish narratives and just more friendlier headlines coming through, which is obviously good for anyone holding Bitcoin. And that's it from me. Back to you in the studio.
Cool, good stuff. Thank you, Ryan. In terms of
Thanks.
today, then, in 5 minutes' time, we have the latest flash PMI figures out of the Eurozone. Obviously, as you alluded to, we've had better than expected data out of France and Germany this morning, so risks are probably tilted to the upside of consensus for this data that we get at the top of the hour. The composite gauge, that is seen falling to 50.6, down for a prior 50.9, but again, risks to that are to the upside. As we move through the remainder of the day at 9:30 this morning, we also have the latest flash PMI figures from here in the UK. We're expected to see an modest improvement across all three surveys, with the composite output gauge seen at 51.6, up for a prior 51.5. Hardly cause for a victory lap. Moving across the pond and into the afternoon session at 1:30 this afternoon, we get the weekly US jobless claims figures. Initial claims seen holding broadly steady at 225,000 in the week to the 16th of August. Continuing claims, they're also seen pretty much unchanged at 1.96 million in the week to the 9th of August. And do recall, of course, that this week's initial jobless claims print, that does coincide with the survey week for the August non-farm payrolls print, which is due in about a fortnight's time. Also out of the States today, we get the latest manufacturing numbers from the Philadelphia Fed. Their survey expected to fall to 6.7 from a prior 15.9 in August. Of course, this is one of the key inputs into expectations for the ISM manufacturing print that we get towards the start of next month. And also from the States today, we get the latest existing home sales stats. They are expected at 3.92 million in July, pretty much unchanged from where they were in June. In terms of other bits and bobs today, notable corporate earnings, they come from the likes of Walmart, who report before the market open. Their guidance around tariffs and consumer spending will be very, very closely watched indeed. And on the policy front, we're due to hear from the Fed's Bostic and the SMB's Martin throughout the day today. And then at some point overnight, I think it's due at about 1:00 UK time, we are due to get the full agenda of who will be speaking when at the Jackson Hole Symposium. Obviously, we know Fed Chair Powell will be making remarks at 3:00 tomorrow afternoon London time, 10:00 on the East Coast of the US. BOE Governor Bailey and ECB President Lagarde, they are both due to be making remarks on Saturday, so obviously when markets are closed, but we will obviously just keep a close eye on that agenda to see who else will be in attendance and who else will be due to be making remarks. And of course, in addition to all of that, market participants remaining on alert for any potential trade and or geopolitical headlines as we move through the next day or so as well. And that is your lot from me this morning.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, as always, Mr. Michael Brown. Big shout out to Cam, who I do the Crypto Blast with. We obviously did one yesterday. Go check that out. And of course, my good grain buddy, Angie Sexer. I was trying to think of something that rhymed with G and I panicked. Who I obviously do the daily grain market blast. Do check that out for anyone involved in agricultural markets. And it's always just a good laugh as well, a bit like this show. And also, but I would say less ranty, and that is at 2:15 UK time, 9:15 Eastern time, if I got my clocks right. Do check those out as well. Michael, thank you again as always. Listeners, thank you as always. And whatever you're doing, keep it tight, stay safe, and we'll see you all tomorrow.